Hi everyone, it is Thursday tea with me, Katie B. I am so excited to be here this week. I missed you guys last week. I was taken out by the stomach bug and I was just out, completely out. That's what you do. That's what happens when you don't allow yourself to rest. So when you're exhausted and you need rest, let yourself rest. Otherwise your body's going to take you out. So anyway, it is Thursday tea. I am excited to be here this week. Today's tea is by Snarky Teas, Calm the Fuck Down. It's kind of like a Caribbean, like a tropical blend. I'm going to give it a little sip. Yep, it's just like being on an island. Nice, like it's a little bit sweet, but not too sweet. It really actually is a nice tea. So if you are here, give me a wave. Let me know you're here. Let me know if you're drinking tea or coffee, or what your favorite tea is right now. It is good. I'm surprised. I wasn't sure when I smelt it, but it tastes pretty good. So anyway, today we are going to talk about exploring the trigger, exploring your triggers, what's behind the trigger. So last week I was sick, like I said, and we missed talking about, what's behind the worry. But that's okay, because this week's about the trigger and they kind of blend together. Because last week I was going to talk about how everything is a learning opportunity. Every time those worries bubble up, it's an opportunity for you to learn. And this week we're going to talk about exploring the trigger, which is about looking at those things that trigger you and learning what's behind the trigger. Because you're pretty powerful and magical, and you can shift those reactions that come from your triggers when you become mindful of them and you learn about what you need in those moments. So, exploring the trigger, your triggers, we all have triggers. So let's just remember that. Like, we all have things that trigger us, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Truly, nothing to be ashamed of. There is nothing wrong with you. We all get triggered. It happens. And these triggers come from life experiences. They come from our belief systems, things that we've been taught, things that we've learned, and they happen, right? It's all of our triggers are very personal. And so when it comes to our triggers, it's not about comparing ourselves to someone else or comparing our journey to someone else. You don't want to do that anyway, but really, when you're talking about your triggers, you want to remember that these are your triggers, and this is your journey, and this is your opportunity to learn about yourself and get to know yourself a little bit better. So let's just briefly talk about what is a trigger. A trigger is anything that sets you off and takes you down a specific path, like a reaction. It could be anxiety comes up, it could be stress comes up, it could be you get angry or sad. And a trigger can be a smell, a sound, something that's said, something that you feel like you're powerless, or you feel like you've been manipulated, or you feel like you've done something wrong. All of these things can trigger us to have a reaction to what is happening, and we can spiral down this path, right? And sometimes we get triggered and we take action that feels good, and that's great. Sometimes we're triggered and it takes us down these paths that don't feel good, or it just is like it's time to make a shift so that you're not triggered by whatever it is that's triggering you. And so every time you're triggered, it's an opportunity to learn, to become mindful of this trigger. So every time you get anxious, every time you get stressed, this is about like saying, okay, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm angry. All right, let's take a breath. What just happened? When did this anxiety start? I wonder if I felt this way and now I'm anxious. Okay, so how can I not feel this way, right? So let's go with the example of feeling powerless, right? Because that's one of my triggers, feeling powerless. After being in an abusive relationship where you feel like you really have no power, you have no control over what's going to happen, that's a trigger for me, feeling powerless. So when I feel powerless, like I have no control over what's going to happen, or, anything, which we never have control over anything, right? I spiral into anxiety, right? I have my root chakra screams at me, and I kind of go into survival mode a little bit. Like, what do I need to do to survive? What needs to happen, right? It's anxious thoughts and stress start to roll in. I start to get overwhelmed. So what I have learned is that when I am triggered because I feel powerless, if I pause and I take a breath and I remind myself, okay, this is not a survival situation. You are okay. You are safe. What can you do to make a change here, to shift the situation in the direction you would like it to go, right? And I take that time to just pause with myself and say, okay, you can make a choice. You have the power to make a choice. You can make a change here. You can do something different, right? Then it's like I take my power back by taking that pause, breathing, and reminding myself that I actually have the power to choose and to make a change, to influence what happens next. So your triggers are yours, and they're there for you to learn and for you to grow and evolve. And just because you acknowledge your trigger once and you shift yourself out of that space once doesn't mean it's not going to come back up, doesn't mean you're not going to be triggered again. This is part of life and part of evolving, part of living. What helps you with those triggers is knowing the things that work. So when the trigger comes up and you say, oh, I've been triggered, I'm getting anxious, what just happened? Oh, I felt powerless. Okay, this is what I need to do. So then you know. So when you take the time to create that space between reacting, you've created the space for you to learn about that trigger and to learn about what you actually need. We go so fast in life, we move so quickly, and we think we need to, right? Because it's time, we only have so much time in the day, we got to get through all this stuff. And so when you're triggered, often we don't create that space and that time to really get to know what it is that you need in that moment. But you have the power to create a shift. And oftentimes when you're triggered, we aren't just triggering anxiety or anger or sadness or these emotions, right? Sometimes we're also triggering the survival response in our body. So we're actually triggering the nervous system to go into survival mode. And when we create that space to pause and to breathe and to kind of sit with ourselves like, okay, I'm triggered here. What just happened? You also create the space for your nervous system to come back out of that survival response by taking the time to take some deep breaths. And a deep breath is like a slow inhale and a slow exhale, right? Creating that space. So creating the space is just help you get behind that trigger and learn what you need to shift it. It also helps you to pull your body out of survival mode, that nervous system out of survival mode and back into a space where you can actually think clearly. Because when we go into survival mode, it deactivates the part of our brain that allows us to like function and speak and be clear in our thought. And we go right into that survival part of the brain and we're just there to survive. Whatever we need to do to survive. And that's anxiety. That's stress, right? So creating that space is really powerful in shifting that trigger and shifting yourself out of that survival response so that you can actually think clearly. So just going to pause for a second there. All of your triggers are guides. They're guides for you. They're messages for you. They're lessons for you. And creating that space allows you to receive those messages, to learn about yourself in ways maybe you didn't even know you could. Hi, Laura. Oh, I love Zen Tea. One of my favorites. If you're here, guys, let me know. Give me a wave. Let me know what tea you're drinking or coffee. So your triggers are there to guide you, to help you evolve on the soul level in this lifetime, to help you learn how to free yourself from all the pressures, all the things. So when you're triggered, it's not a bad thing. Let's remember that. Hi, Rini. it's not a bad thing when you're triggered. It's not something to be ashamed of. It is part of you, right? There has been something in your life, and the best part about this is you don't have to go back to the actual beginning of this trigger, like where it came from and when it started. You don't have to do that. You don't have to visit the experiences that you don't want to. All you got to do is become mindful of the moment that you're in. You're triggered. Anxiety comes up, stress comes up, anger, sadness, whatever it is. Okay, well, what's going on here, right? Do I feel powerless? Do I feel like, is there fear? Did something go in a way I didn't want it to go? Have I felt manipulated? Was there a smell in the air? Was there a sound? Was there certain words that were said? Right? Whatever it is for you, because it can be anything for any of us. It's personal to everyone. But that trigger is teaching you how to move forward and be free. So, when you are triggered, creating that space to see what's behind the trigger. What just happened? Why am I anxious all of a sudden? Oh, I felt powerless. I couldn't control the situation. I couldn't control what happened, and I felt like I had no power. So how do I get my power back? How do I feel powerless? Well, I remind myself that I get to choose. I get to influence the next moment. I get to choose what happens next. And so whatever it looks like for you, that's what you do for yourself. And this takes time. But it's time well spent because you get to know yourself, which means you get to trust yourself even more. You get to spend time loving yourself, which means you love yourself, right? That you'll feel that love. It will lift you up. And you get to shift these triggers and begin to recognize them when they happen instead of swirling down those paths that you don't want to be on, that you don't need to be on. So, really an amazing way to start creating space for yourself is through yoga and meditation. And I want to tell you the science behind this real quick, because I'm not just saying go do yoga, go do meditation because it's amazing. There's actually real science behind this. So when we are triggered, it's like an immediate reaction. Whatever the trigger is, if you're triggered and then it's anxiety, if you're triggered and then it's anger, whatever it is that's triggering you and your reaction is, it's like this immediate response to what has happened. And so we have neural pathways in our brain, and their neural pathway is set up that you are triggered and then the pathway goes off and that's your response. When we do yoga and meditation, we create new neural pathways in the brain that allow us to pause before reacting, before responding. And so it gives us that little bit of space there when we're triggered to take a breath and choose how we want to react and respond. So as we do these things, these yoga and meditation, we're actually creating new neural pathways in the brain which help you pause to create that space when you're triggered. So by becoming mindful when you're triggered and creating that space, you're creating new neural pathways to continue to pause and breathe and choose how you want to react. And when you do yoga and meditation, you support those new neural pathways in being built. Think about a bridge, right? When they build a new bridge, you've got the old bridge and it can still be traveled down, but this new bridge is really amazing and it's really supported and strong because they built it that way. So when you are creating these new neural pathways and you add these practices like yoga and meditation to really support these new neural pathways, they become the strong bridge that sparkles and shines, and that's the bridge you want to take instead of taking the old raggedy bridge that really doesn't serve you. It's kind of scary. So creating this space and being mindful when you're triggered, but also doing these practices like yoga and meditation to help support these new pathways that you're creating so that it becomes easier and simpler to create that space for yourself when you're triggered, to then choose the path you want to take, to choose what you want to do, to how you want to react in your response. because you have that power. So, every trigger is an opportunity to learn. Every time your worries bubble up, every time anxiety bubbles up, anger, sadness, anything, it is an opportunity for you to learn more about yourself and to discover what's behind that trigger. Because you don't have to go in the survival response. You don't have to travel down a path that you don't want to if you don't want to. You have the power to make a choice and to influence your response and reaction. So, what are you going to do next time you're triggered? We're going to pause, create space, become mindful, and figure out what you need to shift that response into one that feels good for you, one that you're okay with. And maybe that is still anger. Maybe that's still anxiety. But you're choosing, which means you have the power, to choose differently if you want. So explore those triggers. Get behind them. Get in that trigger. Don't run from it. Be with it. Be with yourself. Learn about yourself. It's truly, truly powerful. Every time I feel powerless, I now know what I need to do to create a shift. So that stops my anxiety from happening. That stops my stress from happening. That stops me from getting overwhelmed and ultimately just not even knowing what to do and totally crashing. Now, I don't have no anxiety. I have anxiety. I have stress. I get overwhelmed, right? Because life is life. But I know the things that I need to shift out of that because I've done the work to learn about myself and to explore those triggers. And you can do the same. So, Thursday tea today. Explore those triggers. Learn about yourself. There is nothing to be ashamed of. There is nothing wrong with you. Please remember that. We all have triggers. It happens to all of us. Let's get behind them so you can choose how you want to respond and react the next time you're triggered. So today's tea, one more time, is Snarky Tea's Calm the Fuck Down. It was really actually good, kind of like an island vibe, coconut, pineapple-y. Oh, thank you, Rini. I love yours too. If you guys have a chance, Rini is on Instagram. She does chai with Rini on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. EST, I believe. It's ascension, activation, and ancestral healing. It's really an amazing live to check out, or video to check out if you can't come live. Anyway, you guys have a wonderful rest of the day. Reach out to me if you are exploring your triggers, if you have questions, if you want some support. I am happy to chat with you. Just send me a message. Absolutely, Rini. Happy to share. Truly an amazing session, Chai with Rini. All right, you guys. Wonderful day. Lots of love. I'll see you soon.